Hello everyone, my name's Stonesy Boy and I'm sorry for no reading video yesterday. I simply just didn't have the time. I woke up late, so I can do the recording, and if people don't know this, I record, go to my place, and then I go there, and then I come home, and then I do the actual recording. And like I said, if you don't follow me on Twitch, you get the content. If you follow me on Twitch, you get the content 2 days early. So that's kind of how that one works. So today, today we're doing a Minecraft video, because yesterday's Minecraft video was super short, so I want to make either another short one today, or I don't know yet. But today we're going to have a decently short video. We're reading only, what is it, 19 pages, if that, and with the chapter cut downs, it's going to feel less. So, without further ado, and a lot of cuts and edits, let's begin. Ooh, we're on part 2. That's cool. Chapter 21. There was a change in the weather. For the worse. The air became unbearably humid. Stanley was drenched in sweat. Beads of moisture ran down the handle of the shovel. It was almost as if the temperatures had gotten so hot that the air itself was sweating. A loud boom of thunder echoed across the empty lake, a storm of the way of the west, beyond the mountains. Stanley could not count more than 30 seconds between the flash of the lightning and the clap of thunder. That was how far away the storm was. Sound travels great distance across a barren wasteland. Usually, Stanley couldn't see mountains at this time of the day. The only time they were visible was at sunup, before the air became hazy. Now, however, the sky was very dark to the west. Every time the lightning flashed, the dark shape of the mountains would briefly appear. "Come on, rain," shouted Armpit. "Blow this way." "Maybe it'll rain so hard it'll fill up the whole lake," said Squid. "We can go swimming." 40 days and 40 nights, said X-Ray. "Guess we better start building us an ark. Get 2 of each animal, right?" "Right," said Zigzag. 2 rattlesnakes, 2 scorpions, 2 yellow-spotted lizards. The humidity, or maybe the electricity in the air, I made Zigzag's head even more wild-looking. His frizzy blonde hair stuck almost straight out. The horizon lit up with a huge web of lightning. In a split second, Stanley thought he saw an unusual rock formation on the top of one of those mountain peaks. The peak looked like a giant fist. It was a thumb sticking straight up. When it was gone, then Stanley wasn't sure whether he'd seen it or not. "I found refuge on God's thumb." It was what his great-grandfather had supposedly said after Kate Barlow had robbed him and had left him stranded in the desert. No one ever knew what he meant by that. He was delirious when he said it. "But, to live for 3 weeks without food or water?" Stanley had asked his father. "I don't know. I wasn't there," ratted his father. "I wasn't born yet. My father wasn't born yet. My grandmother, your great-grandmother, was nursing in the hospital where they treated him. They'd always talk about how he'd dab his forehead in cool wet cloth. That's why he fell in love with her. He thought she was an angel." "A real angel?" His father didn't know. "What about after he got better? Did he ever say what he meant by God's thumb or how he survived?" "No, he just blamed his no good pig-stealing father." The storm moved farther west, along with the hope of rain. It was the image of a fist and a thumb remained in the Stanley's head. Although, instead of lightning flashing behind the thumb, in Stanley's mind, lightning was coming out of the thumb, as if it were the thumb of God. Chapter 30. The next day it was Zigzag's birthday, or so he said. Zigzag lay in his cot as everyone headed outside. "I get to sleep in because it's my birthday." Then a little while later he cut into breakfast lying in front of Squid. Squid told him to go to the end of the line. "Hey, it's my birthday," Zigzag said, standing where he was. "It's not your birthday," said Magnet, who was standing behind Squid. "It's too," said Zigzag. "July 8th. Stanley was behind Magnet. He didn't know what the day of the week it was, let alone the date. It would have been July 8th, but how would Zigzag know? He tried to figure out how long he'd been in Camp Green Lake if indeed it was July 8th. "I came here on May 24th, he said out loud. "So that means I've been here 46 days, said Zero. Stanley was trying to remember how many days there were in May and June. He took the zero, he learned not to doubt him, and came to math. 46 days felt like 1,000. He didn't dig a hole that first day. He hadn't dug one yet today. That meant he dug 44 holes. If it really was July 8th, then I have extra carton of juice," Zigzag asked Mr. Sir. "It's my birthday. Whoever survives," Mr. Sir gave it to him. Stanley dug his shovel into the dirt. "Hole number 45. The 45th hole is the hardest," he said to himself. But it really wasn't true. He knew it. It was just a lot stronger than he first arrived. His body adjusted somewhat to the heat and harsh conditions. Mr. Sir was no longer depriving him of water. After having by on less water for a week or so, Stanley now felt like he had all the water he wanted. Of course, it helped that Zero dug some of his hole for him each day, but it wasn't as great as everyone thought it was. He always felt awkward while Zero was digging his hole, unsure of what to do with himself. Usually, he stood around a while before sitting off by himself on the hard ground with the sun beating down on him. It was better than digging, but not a lot better. When the sun came up a couple hours later, Stanley looked for the thumb of God. The mountains were little more than dark shadows on the horizon. He thought he could make out a spot on the top of the mountains and see that jut upward, but it doesn't seem very impassive. A short time later, the mountains were no longer visible, hidden behind the glare of the sun, reflecting off the dirty air. It was possible, he realized, that somewhere near the Cape Bartlett had robbed his great-grandfather. If that was her lipstick tube he'd found, then he'd just have to live somewhere around here. Zero took his turn before the lunch break. Stanley climbed out of his hole and Zero climbed down into it. "Hey, caveman," said Zigzag, "you should get a whip. When there's a slave that didn't dig fast enough, you can crack it across his back." "He's not my slave," said Stanley. "We have a deal, that's all." "A good deal for you," said Zigzag. "It was Zero's idea, not mine." "Don't you know, Zig?" said X-Ray, coming over. "Caveman's doing Zero a big favor. Zero likes to dig holes." "He sure is a nice guy to let Zero dig his hole for him," said Squid. "Well, what about me?" asked Armpit. "I like to dig holes, too. Can I dig for you, Caveman, after Zero's finished?" The other boys laughed. "No, I want to," said Zigzag. "It's my birthday." Stanley tried his best to ignore them. Zigzag kept at it. "Come on, Caveman, be a pal. Let me dig your hole." Stanley smiled, as if it were all a big joke. Then Mr. Podensky arrived at the water and lunch. Zigzag offered Stanley in his place. "Since you're so much better than me," Stanley remained where he was. "I didn't say I was better. You're insulting him, Zig," said X-Ray. "Why should Caveman take your place when he deserves to be at the very front? He's better than all of us, aren't you, Caveman?" "No," said Stanley. "You sure are," said X-Ray. "Now come to the front of the line where you belong." "That's okay," said Stanley. "No, it's not okay," said X-Ray. "Get up here." Stanley hesitated, then moved to the front of the line. "Well, this is a first," Mr. Podensky said, coming around to the side of the truck. He filled Stanley's canteen and handed him his sack of lunch. Stanley was glad to get away. He sat down between his hole and Zero's. He was glad he'd be digging his own hole for the rest of the day. Maybe the other boys would leave him alone. Maybe he shouldn't let Zero dig his hole for him anymore. But he needed to save his energy to be a good teacher. He bit into his sandwich, which contained some kind of meat-cheese mixture that came in a can. Just about everything at Camp Green Lake came in a can. The supply truck came once a month. He glanced up at Zigzag and Squid walking toward him. "I'll give you my cookie if you let me dig your hole," said Zigzag. Squid laughed. "Here, take my cookie," said Zigzag, holding it out for him. "No thanks," said Stanley. "Come on, take my cookie," said Zigzag, taking it in his face. "Leave me alone," said Stanley. "Please eat my cookie," said Zigzag, holding it under Stanley's nose. Squid laughed. Stanley pushed it away. Zigzag pushed him back. "Don't push me." "I didn't." Stanley got to his feet. He looked around. Mr. Podensky was filling Zero's canteen. Zigzag pushed him again. "I said, don't push me." Stanley took a backward, nearly avoiding Zero's hole. Zigzag kept after him. He shoved Stanley and said, "Quit pushing." "Lay off," said Armpit, as he, Magnet, and X-Ray joined them. "Why should he?" snapped X-Ray. "Caveman's bigger. He could take care of himself." "I don't want any trouble," Stanley said. Zigzag pushed him hard. "Eat my cookie," he said. Stanley was glad to see Mr. Podensky's coming toward them along with Zero. "Hi, Mom," said Armpit. "We were just fooling around." "I saw what was going on," Mr. Podensky said. He turned to Stanley. "Go ahead, Stanley," he said. "Hit him back. You're bigger." Stanley stared at Mr. Podensky in astonishment. "Teach a bully a lesson," said Mr. Podensky. Zigzag hit Stanley on the shoulder with his open hand. "Teach me a lesson," he challenged. Stanley was a feeble attention to punch Zigzag, then he let his furry fist against the head of his neck. Zigzag had hold his collar in one hand and is hitting him in the other. The collar ripped and Stanley fell backward onto the dirt. "That's enough," Mr. Podensky yelled. It wasn't enough for Zigzag. He jumped on top of Stanley. "Stop," shouted Mr. Podensky. The side of Stanley's face was pressed flat against the dirt. He tried to protect himself, but Zigzag's fist slammed off his arms and pounded his face into the ground. All he could do was wait for it to be over. He looked up as he saw Zero with his arm around Zigzag's long neck. Zigzag made a gagging sound and he desperately tried to pry Zero's arm off him. "You're going to kill him," shouted Mr. Podensky. Zero kept squeezing. Armpit charged into him, freeing Zigzag from Zero's chokehold. Three boys fell to the ground in different directions. Mr. Podensky fired his pistol into the air. The other counselors came running from the office. The tents are out of the lake. They had their guns drawn, but holstered them when they saw trouble was over. The warden walked over to their cabin. There was a riot," Mr. Podensky told her. "Zero almost strangled Ricky." The warden looked at Zigzag, who was still stretching him, massaging his neck. Then he turned his attention to Stanley, who was obviously in worse condition. "What happened to you?" "Nothing. It wasn't a riot." "Ziggy was beating up Caveman," said Armpit. Then Zero started choking Zigzag, and I had to pull Zero off Zigzag. It was all over before Mom fired his gun. They just got a little hot, that's all, said X-Ray. You know how it is, the sun all day, people get hot, right? But everything's cool now. I see, said Warden said, and turned to Zigzag. What's the matter? Didn't you get a puppy for your birthday? Zig's just a little hot, said X-Ray. In the sun all day? You know how it is, the blood starts to boil. Is that what happened, Zigzag? Asked the Warden. Yeah, said Zigzag. Like X-Ray said, working so hard in the hot sun while Caveman just sits around doing nothing, my blood boiled. Excuse me, said the Warden. Caveman digs his holes, just like everyone else. Zigzag shrugs. Sometimes. Excuse me? Zero's been digging part of Caveman's hole every day, said Squid. The Warden looked at Squid and to Stanley to Zero. I'm teaching him to read and write, said Stanley. It's sort of a trade. The hole still gets dug, so it doesn't matter who digs it. Excuse me, said the Warden. It doesn't... And more important for him to learn to read, Stanley asked. Doesn't that build character more than digging holes? That's his character, said the Warden. What about your character? Stanley raised and lowered one shoulder. The Warden turned to Zero. What, Zero? What have you learned so far? Zero said nothing. Have you just been digging Caveman's hole for nothing? The Warden had asked him. He likes to dig holes, said Mr. Brudensky. Tell me what you learned yesterday, said the Warden. Surely you can remember that. Zero said nothing. Mr. Brudensky laughed. He picked up a shovel and said, you might as well teach his shovel to read. He's got more brains than Zero. The at sound, said Zero. The at sound, repeated the Warden. Well then tell me, what does C-A-T spell? Zero glanced around uneasily. Stanley never knew the answer. Zero just didn't like answering questions. Cat, Zero said. Mr. Dusky clapped his hand. Bravo, bravo, the boy's a genius. F-A-T, asked the Warden. Zero thought for a moment. Stanley hadn't taught him the F sound yet. F, Zero whispered. F, at, fat. How about H-A-T, asked the Warden. Stanley hadn't taught him the H sound either. Zero concentrated hard and then said, chat. All the counselors laughed. He's a genius, all right, said Mr. Brudensky. He's so stupid, he doesn't even know he's stupid. Stanley didn't know why Mr. Brudensky seemed to have it for Zero. If Mr. Brudensky only thought about it, he realized that it's logical for Zero to think the letter H was a CH sound. Okay, from now on, I don't want anyone digging anyone else's hole, said the Warden. And no more reading lessons. I'm not digging another hole, said Zero. Good, said the Warden. She turned to Stanley. You know why you're digging holes? Because it's good for you. Teaches you a lesson. If Zero digs your hole, then you're not learning your lesson, are you? I guess not, Stanley mumbled. Although he knew they weren't digging just to learn a lesson, she was looking for something that belonged to Kissing Kate Barlow. Why can't I dig my own hole, but still teach Zero to read, he asked. What's wrong with that? I'll tell you what's wrong with that, said the Warden. It leads to trouble. Zero almost killed Zigzag. It causes him stress, said Mr. Brudensky. I know you mean well, Stanley, but face it, Zero's too stupid to learn to read. That's what makes his blood boil, not the sun. I'm not digging another hole, said Zero. Mr. Brudensky handed him a shovel. Here, take it, Zero. It's all you'll ever be good for. Zero took the shovel. Then he swung it like a baseball bat. The little blade smashed across Mr. Brudensky's face. His knees crumpled beneath him. He was unconscious before he hit the ground. All counselors drew their guns. Zero had the shovel in front of him, as if he were going to try to bat away the bullets. I hate digging holes, he said. Then he slowly backed away. Don't shoot him, said the Warden. He can't go anywhere. The last thing we need is an investigation. Zero kept backing up with his best of cluster of holes the boys had been digging, then farther and farther out into the lake. He's going to have to come back for water, the Warden said. Stanley noticed Zero's canteen lying on the ground near his hole. A couple of counselors helped Mr. Brudensky to his feet and into the truck. Stanley looked out towards Zero, but he disappeared into the haze. The Warden ordered the counselors to take turns guarding the shower and rec room all day and all night. They were not to let Zero drink any water. Then he returned as he brought directly to her. He examined her fingernails and said, It's almost time for me to paint my nails again. Before she left, she told the 6 remaining members of the Group D that they will be expected 7 holes. Chapter 31. Stanley angrily dug his hole into the dirt. He was angry at everyone. Mr. Brudensky, the Warden, Zigzag, X-Ray, his no good, dirty, rotten, pig-stealing great-great-grandfather, but he mostly was angry at himself. He knew he never would have let Zero dig part of his hole for him. He still could have taught him to read. If Zero would dig all day, he would have the strength to learn. Then he should have been able to dig all day and have the strength to teach. What he should do, he thought, was to go out after Zero, but he didn't. None of the others helped him dig Zero's hole, and he didn't expect them to. Zero had been helping him dig his hole, and now he had to dig Zero's. He remained out in the lake digging during the hottest part of the day, long after everyone else had gone in. He kept an eye out for Zero, but Zero didn't come back. It would have been easy to go out after Zero, but there was nobody to stop him. He kept thinking about what he should do. Maybe he could climb up to the top of a big thumb, if it wasn't too far away, and if it was really the same place where his great-grandfather found refuge, and if after 100 years ago water was still there. It didn't seem likely, not when an entire lake had gone dry, and even if he'd find refuge on Big Thumb, he thought they'd still have to come back eventually. Then they'd both have to face the Warden and the rattlesnake fingers. Instead, he came up with a better idea. Although he didn't have quite it all figured out, He thought that maybe he could make a deal with the warden. He'd tell her he really found a gold tube if he wouldn't scratch Zero. He wasn't sure how he'd make the deal out of getting himself in deeper trouble. She might just say, tell me where you found it or I'll scratch you too. Plus, it wouldn't mean X-Ray would get in trouble too. She'd probably scratch him up as well. X-Ray would be out to get him for the next 60 months. He'd dig his shovel into the dirt. By next morning, Zero hadn't returned. Stanley saw one of the counselors sitting guard of the water spigot outside the shower hall. Mr. Podensky had 2 black eyes and a bandage over his nose. I always knew he was stupid, Stanley heard him say. Stanley was trying to dig only one hole the next day. As he dug, he kept constant watch out for Zero, but never saw him. Once again, he considered going out to the lake and look for him. Then he began to realize he was already too late. His only hope was Zero had found God's thumb on his own. It wasn't impossible. His great-grandfather had found it, but for some reason his great-grandfather had felt the urge to climb to the top of the mountain. Maybe Zero would feel the same urge. If it wasn't the same mountain, if water was still there. He tried to convince himself it wasn't impossible. There had been a storm just a few days ago. Maybe Big Thumb was actually some kind of natural water tower that caught and stored the rain. It wasn't impossible. He turned to the tent to find the warden, Mr. Sir and Mr. Podensky all waiting for him. Have you seen Zero? The warden asked him. No. No sign of it at all? No. Do you have any idea where he went? No. You know, you're not doing him any favors if you're lying, said Mr. Sir. He can't survive out there with more than a day or two. I don't know where he is. All 3 stared at Stanley as if they were trying to figure out if he was telling the truth. Mr. Podensky's face was still swollen. He could barely open his eyes. They were just slits. You sure he has no family? The warden asked Mr. Podensky. He's a ward of the state, Mr. Podensky told her. He was living on the streets when he was arrested. Is there anyone who might ask questions? Some social worker who took interest in him. He had nobody, said Mr. Podensky. He was nobody. The warden thought for a moment. Okay, I want you to destroy all of his records. Mr. Podensky nodded. He was never here, said the warden. Mr. Sir nodded. Can you get into the state files on your computer? She asked Mr. Podensky. I don't want anyone in the AG's office to know he was here. I don't think I can erase him completely from the state files, said Mr. Podensky. There's too many cross-references. But I can make it so it was very difficult for everyone to ever find the record of him. Like I said, though, no one will ever look. No one cares about Hector Zeroni. Good, said the warden. And that's the end of today's reading. Not bad, really. It's not bad at all. If not a little short. But yeah, it wasn't bad at all. All in all, though, next time we're reading pages 145. 1 second. 145 to page. Of course, this was cut up. Oh, fantastic. My whiteboard full of my freaking reading answers has been cut up. Fantastic. Usually it's 160. 36 goes to 166. Yeah, we can do it to 166. It's only 21 pages. 145 to 166, which means it's 21 pages. So, that's not bad. Anyways, I hope you guys have a super fantastic, wonderful day. People like Big Fish, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And I'll see you guys next time.